You think about your business like a relationship. Good, because it is, right? How many of you have been in a relationship and had some issues? Okay, so the rest of you are single. Good. No, so if you think about any relationship that has real value, right? Work is the common element if it lasts. There's a great documentary, some of you may or may not have seen, Some Kind of Monster. Who's a Metallica fan? So if you haven't seen it, spend 2 hours when you're done doing all this, entertaining yourself for another 2 hours before you actually do some work and go watch it. But it's a great documentary that kind of goes inside the making of one of their albums. And they were going through some major personal stuff. And why it's a great entrepreneurial documentary, in my opinion, is if you want to understand partnership dynamics and what it takes, to build a business with any other human being, it's a good documentary to kind of do that. But your customer is no different, right? I mean, your customer is your ultimate relationship, because without them, you don't exist.
Yeah, I like the relationship analogy. So brands, the most successful brands aren't the ones that pushed it on you. They're the ones that delivered on and just made you a promise. They're the ones that have delivered on it day in and day out, every day, all day. Think of the brands that are actually sustaining, and the ones that you truly love and truly covet. That's about the delivery of the promise, not the telling of the promise or the language around the promise. It's on the delivery of it, and that is customer experience.
So that gets to your side of the equation, Ed, which is if I'm designing something from the ground up, that's different than trying to implement something into an existing culture. The unique challenge is you have to do both in your line of work. But what are some of the things I need to be thinking about to operationalize customer experience in my organization?
I appreciate the question. I like the analogies about the relationship. And to Robert's point, I definitely think it's about all the reasons to believe and showing tangible delivery and outcomes for what you promised to folks, right? So that's near and dear to me, actually delivering and getting to the outcome. I think first and foremost, not to be too ethereal about it, but is for everyone in the organization to actually value the customer empathy. That's an important thing. And I'm not talking about the customer service folks or the salespeople. I'm talking about the operations folks, the finance folks, the back office, the IT folks, right? To understand that, in fact, is a differentiator in the marketplace, and particularly in the B2C place, the need for that is acute, right? And so I think understanding and valuing that and talking about it, making it essentially a part of your core values of that it's a relationship business, it's a people business at the end of the day, no matter who you are, whether you're producing a software product or a service like Tollwave does. And then ultimately doing as you do, like Tollwave, we do a lot of forensics with our clients of watching their customer experience and a multitude of other things, all the touch points, but kind of doing that internally as well, really understanding where you're touching the clients internally, and is it leading to that outcome of that.
So an example of an internal one, just give us one, like a use case, because I know where you're going with it, but just so we can get clearer picture in our mind. What would be an example of how I do it internally? It's not customer facing, right?
No, it's not customer facing. It's really analyzing. It's a lot of process analysis and really understanding what that looks like. So Terry mentioned customer journey mapping as a tool to use. One of the other tools we use, and we use it internally as well, is not just look at all the different touch points, but what enables those touch points, what technologies, what processes, what actors, people that enable that. And that kind of tells you the types of skill sets and roles and capabilities that this organization needs, and who's got accountability for what, and where those assignments should go, which ultimately leads to organizational development and how you structure an organization to enable it and actually deliver on what you say you do.
So we've all had a bad example of this, right? How many of you have ever been to a hospital? Did you ever ask them what your bill's going to be? What happens? They can't tell you, right? Now, that's an example of an internal facing design flaw, right? That regardless of where it came from, it's not about debating that, but as we've raised expectations through things like Uber or Amazon, where we've had a good checkout experience, or we've had that, even though it's not the same as healthcare or it's not the same as financial services or banking, what happens when our expectations get delivered on a level that they've never been before? Do we want to go backwards or forwards? So as a startup person, one of the things I'd be thinking about as a takeaway is I get to start, right, my organization from scratch. I can build this however I want. What I don't want to build is something super complex that doesn't talk to itself, where when I deliver a customer, let's say in the hospital example, I have a great doctor as my front end product, they do their job, but then before they leave, after they've had a great experience solving whatever ailment they came in for, when they ask the accounting person, can you tell me what my bill's going to be before I give you my credit card? The accounting person can't even figure out how to do it, not because they're not smart, but because the systems don't talk to each other to know the billing. What does that do to me as now the patient after I've just been at the hospital? I have a negative outcome at the point you don't want me to, and everything else that was good about that experience goes out the window. So as a startup, whatever business you're in, who's doing it that way, and where is there a gap for you? Go ahead.
So I was just going to touch on the fact that that's like those multiple checkpoints throughout any engagement is so important, because you can, as you know, as an engagement starts and you ask a customer, how are they feeling? And they say, I'm a 10, I feel great. Then that tells you, that gives you information about your sales process, about that handoff between sales and delivery. As Ed was saying, just how teams are set up, is it the right team? And as you're going on through the engagement, if you have multiple checkpoints, and it doesn't have to be a sit down, heart to heart conversation, it could be a quick email, it can be a quick survey, and then you're able to gauge. If you watch the engagement start at a 10 and throughout the process start to dip down, and by the time they receive their invoice, they're like a 2, you have to, one, you should never let it get that way if you did multiple checkpoints, but you're able to identify where there's issues within your own organization. And so if those multiple checkpoints in the hospital example, if they were asking and there was some way to track that, and up until the point where that patient got, signed the papers to be released, and we know that the next step is accounting, and you watch that experience drop, that's a huge opportunity. Like, that's where the most opportunity lies, is within your current failures.
So we call those pain points, right?
So those are the pain points, and those are areas that you can fix, and that, like Ed touched on, you look at that stuff and dissect it and figure out how to really improve on it. And customers love that the most at the end of the day.
Well, I think that's where the real innovation is going to happen. That's where the real disruption happens. Look, so take Uber, and I'll give you 2 examples, one that we all understand well. There have been plenty of software products, inside apps and inside cabs, that point solutions for different parts of it for years, and the cab experience still sucks. Uber steps outside and they say, look at the entire customer journey from the time you need a cab until the time you get out, and scored it probably exactly like Terry said. And where does it suck? It sucks because you don't know when the car's coming. You don't know if the car is going to be clean or if the driver's going to be a goof. And paying is a pain in the butt, getting out of the cab. Those are the 3 things that they do extremely well, right? And that makes everything like go, whoa, that changed everything. And you can see how they disrupted. There's a local startup here in town called Duffel, which many of you may have heard of. They've been around for about 2 years now. They're doing pretty well. They are a service for frequent business travelers to ship their luggage to their next destination. So say if you're on the road literally 5 days a week, you have to not only lug your business travel, your clothes around all the time, all the hassles of carrying it, getting through x-rays. You guys, you've been in an airport, you know how hard it is. But then when you get there, your clothes are dirty because you've been traveling all week at every stop. So you have to find a dry cleaner. You got to go to the dry cleaner, or you got to pay through the nose for the concierge. And then you got to do it all over again. So Duffel stepped back and said, what all stinks in that process from a frequent business traveler, and fixed all those. And so Duffel sends you a bag. You put all your stuff in it, and you leave it with the concierge when you leave. They take care of it. They do the dry cleaning, and they get the bag to your next destination, unpacked and in your closet. Lickety split. So those are 2 examples.
Isn't there a tagline like your closet in the cloud or something like that?
It is. See, brand and product experience.
I don't know. I remember you saying something. So how many of you have done a journey map for your current business that you're working on? How many of you don't know what that is? Like, you've heard us talk about it, but you're not really clear. You don't know. Okay, that's good. So if you can imagine, what are you working on? Just tell us what market are you in? Performance arts? Oh, performance parts. Okay. So if I didn't know you, right, and I was like a gearhead or something like that, and I wanted to soup up my car, what would I do first? Like, I just became aware that I bought a, I don't know, a 72 Chevelle. So that's a touch point, right? Like, in other words, the minute I become aware of I need a performance thing, I'm going to go what? I'm going to pull up my phone and I'm going to go performance radiator or whatever it is that I think I need for my 72 Chevelle. So there's an awareness phase of I have a problem, meaning I need to go buy something, right? So even if there was 50 people in Phoenix doing exactly what you're trying to do, what you'd be doing as a journey map, just to simplify it, is you go, well, what's the first thing that happens? Well, the first thing is they become aware that they need what I do. The second thing is they do what? They start to evaluate options, right? Which is searching, researching. So each one of those touch points in a journey map, we're engaging with something, aren't we? Like, how many of you have searched for something, clicked on the site, and then immediately hit back because you didn't see something that was like interesting, right? That's called pogo sticking. So you pay all this money to get SEO and performance media to drive me to your site, and the minute I click, I go, I don't know what the hell that is, and I click back. Fail. True? So like at that touch point, how do you measure? So when you do a journey map, really all you're doing is you're saying, what are the 15 or 13 steps that somebody that wants what I do has to go through, whether I exist or not? And then how do I currently rank against whoever else is doing it at those 15 steps? Does that make sense for those who didn't know what a journey map is? So that goes all the way through, like what Terry's saying. I left your business. So I bought from you 3 or 4 times and you did something that irritated me, and now I go buy from your competitor and I no longer am buying from you. And maybe I'm still in your database, maybe I'm not, right? It's even beyond that. It's like, what do I do with my detractors? So talk about closing the loop as just another thing that you could be thinking about. Like, what does it mean to close the loop on the journey map side or the customer experience side with people who've left you as a client or as a customer?
So we can go back to your hospital example. So if through those touch points, the hospital was asking the patient or the family members these questions, so not only looking at that journey from the hospital's perspective, but really wanting to dig into it from the customer's perspective. So they find out that the tail end of this process, this accounting piece, didn't work. You can use that example for short-term engagements with clients or a client that wasn't happy and walked away. So whatever it is, when they left, they weren't happy. And so there is a net promoter score, so you can reach out to clients where they have just left you or the engagement has ended and have them rank your service. And at the bottom end of that is detractors. So these are people that would be out in the market speaking poorly of you. And this is an opportunity, like, to not be afraid to contact those people. Most of the time we know who they are when the engagement is ended, and it's really easy to want to say, I'm not reaching out to them. I know they don't like us, we're good. But talking to them and asking them about what parts of the process they felt like we failed. And a lot of times they'll just say, I felt like I didn't get respected, or I felt like this. And like I started this conversation with, like, it is their feelings, and those feelings are real. But that's like that's the perfect time to say why. And then you can start to dig into some specifics around the engagement. And then, you gather that and you meet with your team and you talk about those things and you ask yourself, like, how can we change that? What did we do wrong? How can we improve this? But you don't leave it there. Once a plan has been put in place and, an action plan is there and you're starting to do this with existing clients, then calling that customer back and saying, we heard you. This is what you said we did. This is where you feel we failed you. And we want you to know that we listened, and here's what we've changed, and here's what we're doing. And we just want to know, if this was in place when you were our client, how would you feel today? And most of the time, they're going to say that they would feel pretty good. So that person left the engagement unhappy. We did nothing to change that with them. But just by listening to them and putting that stuff into our current processes and then closing the loop, going back to them and saying, thank you. We heard you. and now we're changing, and we're going to be better because of you. That person that may have been a detractor 3 months ago is now a promoter because they've been heard.
So this goes to your point, and I've seen you do this, but I want you to kind of try and think through what lessons you've learned by managing this kind of thing. When that's a leadership thing, right? That's building a culture in a business where it's accountable, but it's also like it's a safe place to work, if that makes sense. In other words, it's not okay if we fail doing the same thing, but when we fail, we're going to go close the loop on it and figure it. What are the things? Because that's a process. A lot of people don't leave that piece. They leave that piece out because it's just easy to move on to the next. As a leader, what are the things as an operator that you've done well in your opinion, as far as leading by example or whatever, that have made that something okay and that we must do? Because I think a lot of people go, well, how do I execute that and make people feel safe, but at the same time accountable to it's not okay when people leave?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, and I kind of alluded to this, I think what Terry talks about, regarding closing the loop, and you can follow it a bit, and it's an investment, right? It's an investment in taking the effort to do that and caring about it. So it is in fact an investment. And so that's culturally and organizationally you have to be willing to make. And then you've got to create an environment where it's okay to hear that the baby's ugly, or things aren't going so well. Like you've got to be able to take that and be big enough to do that, and then bake it into your process. I think we look at ours quarterly or twice a year, where we do a big synthesis of all the things that we've messed up and all the things that we've done, and we actually, and it's a lot of people in a room, and it's hours and hours of trying to figure out how to make it better, and then piloting something new, right? Testing something.
You guys even have a name, don't you call it like brutal facts or brutal truths or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And then we take immediate action items on like listing down the things that, okay, are the things here that we feel that these are the most important. Often Terry leads the charge along with our delivery groups, just figuring out how to make it work and fix it. And then going back to Terry's point, closing the loop with them. But allowing that to happen and making the investment, particularly, in our business, it's hard. We're a service business, so the labor hour is our economic unit.
Yeah.
But we have to make that investment. And the way you measure it ultimately, because at the end of the day, you got to measure it, right? It's about whether you're succeeding. So you're looking at renewal rates and retention, and referral rates, and the percentage of your business coming from existing business or referrals and things like that, and how long you've had customers. And at the end of the day, it shows up. We've actually just recently done that at Tallwave. I think a couple of weeks ago. You looked at 2016 versus 15.
Yeah, our retention rate went up by like 40 points just by really digging in hard to where we had seen some failures.
And it's a tiny things, right? It's like really looking at all the touch points. And we've had issues like, the way our meetings are structured. Sometimes in the past, our meetings felt like they were too rushed, or closing the loop on the back end. Like, how do you actually deliver a final product and outcome to put an exclamation point on? How does that feel to a customer? So it's little things that all amount to and all culminate in a feeling, experience with the company. It's an investment.
Yeah, it's an investment. I like that.
So
it's an investment for sure, and I like that you called out. I saw a couple heads nod that you understand your service business and you're trading your unit of economic value. If I'm an app business, I'm trading my unit of economic value to get something that's lost, but to learn so that I don't get that same result in the future. So it's going to be different whether you're a SaaS company or whether you're a service business. But at the end of the day, it's an investment of something that you have an economic value driver from back into closing the loop with customers you've lost. So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add a little bit more to what Ed said. I think it's interesting because when we were going through this process the last time, it's easy to get, we talk about the touch points and remembering who all of the people are, who all the touch points are. So, you've got one piece of it, which is delivery, and you've got this, but the delivery team may be 10 people, So the last time we were looking at it, we learned some interesting stuff with one engagement. This particular client had gone through multiple project managers just because from our perspective, somebody moved on to another project. We didn't even see how big of an issue that was in a long-term engagement. So an action item from that, we can't change. There's going to be turnover. Project managers are going to move. We can't fix that. But what we can fix is when that happens, how do we have that conversation with our customers? So it's not always what you find in this process isn't always, like, oh, we've got to be faster or we've
Right.
got to be more diligent on this. Like, it was something that none of us saw until we sat and looked at the entire engagement with this particular client. And it was really eye-opening.
It's a good example.
So just one more thing on that is consistency is important, right? So for those in business development or sales, to those that are contracting and then ultimately handing it off to the delivery team or that subscription team, support or what have you, all the way to the monthly invoicing, there's got to be some brand and customer experience consistency there, right? I mean, you may have a great sales or contracting experience, but when you're actually in the mix day to day, that can't not be as excellent as the first experience. So you've got to carry that all the way through. And Robert, you and I always talk about how important it is for a brand to be consistent all the way through to the points of like good times and also bad times, including escalations and things like that.
So let's go to some questions.